I don't even know where to start. Maybe with the way she smiled at me that morning, calm, unbothered, like everything was fine. Like she hadn't just burned the last 10 years of our lives to the ground without me even realizing it. Her name is Melissa. Or I guess I should say was. Because the Melissa I thought I married isn't the same woman I see now, sitting across the kitchen table, casually scrolling through her phone while I'm drowning in a storm I didn't even know was coming. It all started 2 weeks ago. A regular Tuesday, just like any other. I was at work, slogging through emails and trying not to fall asleep during yet another pointless meeting. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from my brother, Ryan. Ryan and I are close. We grew up in a small town, just the two of us against the world after our parents' divorce. He's younger by 4 years but always had this streak of protectiveness about him, like he was the older one. So when his text popped up, I didn't think much of it. Ryan, hey, are you free for lunch today? Need to talk. That wasn't unusual. We met up for lunch every couple of weeks, swapping stories about work, life, and, more often than not, me complaining about Melissa. Not that we had a bad marriage or anything. It was just, comfortable. Boring, maybe, but steady. Or so I thought. Sure, I texted back. 1 o'clock at that diner near your place. His reply came instantly, perfect. See you there. When I walked into the diner, Ryan was already there, a coffee in front of him, his knee bouncing under the table like it always does when he's nervous. He looked up when he saw me and forced a smile. Something was off. What's up? I asked, sliding into the booth across from him. You look like you've seen a ghost. He hesitated, running a hand through his hair, which had gotten longer since I'd last seen him. This isn't easy to say, bro. My stomach tightened. What is it? Is it Mom? Dad? No, no. Nothing like that. He glanced around the diner, as if making sure no one could hear us. Then he leaned forward, lowering his voice. It's about Melissa. I laughed nervously. What about her? He didn't laugh. Didn't even crack a smile. He just looked at me, his face pale, like he wanted to be anywhere else but here. She's been cheating on you, man. For a second, I thought I misheard him. What? She's cheating on you, he repeated. I've known for a while now, but I didn't know how to tell you. My ears started ringing. The sounds of the diner faded, the clinking of dishes and murmured conversations replaced by the pounding of my heartbeat. How do you know? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ryan looked down, guilt etched across his face. Because I've seen it. I've been around. Been around? My voice was sharper now, confusion mixing with anger. What the hell does that mean, Ryan? He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. It's someone I know. Someone, close. And just like that, the world stopped spinning. What do you mean, close? I asked, my voice low but taut with anger. The pounding in my chest was almost deafening. Ryan couldn't even look at me. His eyes stayed glued to the chipped edge of the diner table, and that only made me angrier. Say it, Ryan, I demanded, leaning forward. If you're going to drop this on me, then don't half-ass it. Tell me everything. He finally looked up, and the pain in his eyes hit me like a freight train. It's me, Mark, he said quietly. I'm the one she's been seeing. For a moment, I thought I misheard him. The words didn't make sense, they couldn't make sense. My little brother, the guy who grew up in the bunk bed below me, who stood next to me on my wedding day, who cheered me on during every milestone of my life, had been sleeping with my wife. I stared at him, waiting for him to laugh or say it was some sick joke. But he didn't. He just sat there, guilt and regret etched into his face. You're lying, I said, shaking my head. This is some kind of messed up prank. Right? Tell me you're joking. I wish I was, he said, his voice barely audible. I've been trying to end it, but... Trying to end it? I snapped, my voice rising. A few heads turned in our direction, but I didn't care. How long has this been going on? He hesitated, and that hesitation was all the answer I needed. A year, he finally admitted. A year. I stood up so fast the table rattled, and the coffee in front of him spilled over the edge. A year? I said, my voice shaking with fury. You've been screwing my wife for a year, and you're just now telling me? Mark, I'm sorry, Ryan said, standing up too. He reached for me, but I stepped back like his touch might burn me. I never wanted this to happen. It just... Don't, I said, pointing a finger at him. Don't you dare say it just happened. You don't trip and fall into someone else's bed, Ryan. You made a choice. Over and over again. His face crumpled, but I didn't care. All I could see was red. Why? I asked, my voice breaking. Why would you do this to me? I don't know, he said helplessly. I was in a bad place, and Melissa, she was, there. It got out of control before I could stop it. You could have stopped it by not starting it. I yelled, slamming my fist against the table. You had 1,000 chances to do the right thing, and you chose to stab me in the back instead. Mark, please, he said, his voice cracking. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but You're damn right you don't, I cut him off. And you sure as hell aren't going to get it. I stormed out of the diner, my chest heaving as I gulped in air. The world outside felt too bright, too loud, too wrong. My brother and my wife. The two people I trusted most in the world had been lying to me for an entire year. I got in my car and sat there for a long time, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I wanted to scream, to hit something, to make the world feel the way I did, shattered. But instead, I just sat there, numb. Eventually, I drove home, my mind racing with questions I didn't want answers to. Melissa's car was in the driveway, her betrayal parked neatly beside mine like it belonged there. I stepped inside, and there she was, standing in the kitchen with that same calm, unbothered look I'd seen that morning. Hey, she said with a smile. You're home early. How was lunch with Ryan? The casualness of her tone was like a slap to the face. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. Don't, I said, my voice cold. Don't play innocent with me. Her smile faltered. What are you talking about? You and Ryan, I said, the words like poison in my mouth. I know. Her face went pale, and for a moment, she looked like she might deny it. But then her shoulders sagged, and she let out a shaky breath. I didn't want you to find out like this, she said. You didn't want me to find out at all, I shot back. You were just going to keep screwing my brother behind my back and smiling in my face like nothing was wrong. Mark, please, she said, stepping closer. Let me explain. Explain. I laughed bitterly. You think there's an explanation that makes this okay? That makes you sleeping with my brother something I can just brush off. I made a mistake, she said, tears welling in her eyes. I was lonely, Anne. No, I interrupted. Don't you dare make this about me. Don't you dare try to spin this like it's my fault. She froze, her tears spilling over as she looked at me, pleading. I love you, Mark. I do. Stop, I said, my voice breaking. Just, stop. I turned and walked out of the house, leaving her standing there. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do. All I knew was that the life I thought I had was gone, and I didn't know if I could ever get it back. I drove aimlessly for hours, the roads blurring into a gray haze. My mind replayed the diner conversation, Melissa's confession, and every single moment from the past year that now felt tainted. The holidays we spent together. The dinners with Ryan laughing at my jokes while he was laughing at me behind my back. Eventually, I pulled into the parking lot of a cheap motel. I couldn't face going home, not yet. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I sat in the car, staring blankly at the sign advertising free Wi-Fi and weekly rates. My phone buzzed in my pocket, snapping me out of my trance. I glanced at the screen, Melissa. I hit decline without hesitation, but the texts came next. Melissa, please come home. We need to talk. Melissa, I'm sorry, Mark. I know I messed up. I love you. Please don't shut me out. Melissa, let me explain everything. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and leaned back, pressing my hands to my face. Her words felt hollow, like echoes bouncing off the wreckage she had created. I wasn't ready to hear her excuses, her justifications, her pleas for forgiveness. Not yet. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the car window and a stiff neck from sleeping in the driver's seat. I checked my phone out of habit, more missed calls and texts from Melissa, but also one from Ryan. Ryan, I need to see you. Please, bro. Let me fix this. I laughed bitterly. Fix this? How exactly did he plan to fix a year of betrayal? But as much as I wanted to block his number and never speak to him again, part of me wanted answers. I needed to know how this happened, why this happened. I texted him back, meet me at Dad's old place. Noon. Dad's house was a relic of our childhood, a small brick home that had been gathering dust since he moved to Florida 2 years ago. It felt strange stepping inside, like walking into a time capsule. The faded couch where Ryan and I used to wrestle. The kitchen table where we ate frozen pizzas and complained about school. It was a place filled with memories of the bond we once had, a bond he had shattered. Ryan arrived right on time, his face pale and drawn. He hesitated in the doorway, like he was afraid to step inside. Thanks for meeting me, he said quietly. Don't thank me, I said, my tone icy. Just talk. He nodded, stepping into the living room and sitting on the edge of the couch. I stayed standing, crossing my arms as I waited for him to start. It wasn't supposed to happen, he said after a long silence. I didn't wake up one day and decide to betray you. It just got out of control. I scoffed. Spare me the clichés, Ryan. How did it start? He looked down, his hands clasped tightly together. Last year, after you and Melissa had that big fight about her spending so much time at work, she called me. She was upset, and she needed someone to talk to. And that someone just happened to be you, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. I didn't think anything of it at first, he continued, ignoring my tone. She was venting, and I wanted to help. But then, we started talking more. She'd call me late at night, or we'd meet up for coffee. It felt innocent at the time, but looking back, I should have known where it was headed. You think? I snapped. So when did it stop being innocent, Ryan? When did you decide to cross the line? He flinched at my words, his guilt written all over his face. I don't know. One night, she showed up at my apartment after a fight with you. She was crying, and I didn't stop her when she kissed me. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How many times? I asked, my voice trembling. How many times did you sleep with her? Mark. Answer me. I shouted, my fists clenched at my sides. 5, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. It only happened 5 times, and then we stopped. We knew it was wrong, and we ended it. 5 times, I repeated, the words like acid in my throat. And what about the other 360 days of the year? What about the lies and the secrecy? That wasn't wrong enough for you to stop. I regret it every day, he said, his voice breaking. I hate myself for what I did to you. You're my brother, Mark. I love you, and I. Don't you dare say you love me, I said, my voice shaking with fury. You don't do this to someone you love. He stood, desperation in his eyes. I'm begging you, man. Don't let this destroy us. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. There's no making this right, I said coldly. You made your choice, Ryan. Now you have to live with it. I turned and walked out of the house, slamming the door behind me. The weight of his betrayal hung heavy in the air, but as I drove away, I realized something. This wasn't just about Ryan or Melissa. It was about me, what I was willing to accept, what I was willing to forgive. And right now, I wasn't ready to forgive anyone. I didn't go home after meeting Ryan. The thought of walking through that front door, of facing Melissa and the hollow lies she would inevitably try to feed me, made my stomach churn. Instead, I drove to a nearby park and sat in the car, staring out at the empty swings swaying in the breeze. My mind raced with everything Ryan had said. 5 times. The number echoed in my head like a broken record. How many other nights had Melissa come home and kissed me with the same lips that had been on him? How many family dinners had we shared where they exchanged secret glances across the table while I sat there, blissfully unaware? The betrayal felt too big to wrap my head around. My brother and my wife, the 2 people who knew me better than anyone, who were supposed to have my back, had torn me apart instead. By the time I walked through the front door, it was late, and Melissa was waiting in the living room. She looked up when I entered, her eyes red and puffy from crying. Mark, she said, standing up. Thank God. I was so worried. Don't, I snapped, cutting her off. Don't act like you care. She flinched, her hands twisting nervously. Please, can we just talk? I know you're angry, but I need you to understand. Understand? I said, my voice rising. What exactly am I supposed to understand, Melissa? That you couldn't keep your hands off my brother? That you lied to me for a year? Enlighten me. I never meant for this to happen, she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. I swear to you, Mark. I love you. I never stopped loving you. Funny way of showing it, I said bitterly. Was it love when you went to his apartment? Was it love when you kissed him? When you slept with him? She broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. I was lonely, Mark. You were always working, always distracted. I felt invisible, and Ryan, he was there. I shook my head, my anger boiling over. So that's your excuse. You felt lonely, so you decided to destroy everything we built. Do you have any idea what you've done to me? To us? I know, she whispered. I hate myself for what I did. But please, Mark, don't let this be the end of us. I'll do anything to fix it. Therapy, counseling, whatever it takes. I stared at her, my chest heaving with the weight of my rage and heartbreak. Fix it? I said, my voice trembling. How do you fix something that's already broken? I'll prove to you that I can change, she pleaded. Please, Mark. Just give me a chance. I wanted to scream, to tell her that no amount of therapy or promises could undo what she had done. But instead, I walked past her and headed for the stairs. Where are you going? She called after me, her voice cracking. To sleep, I said without looking back. Because I sure as hell can't be around you right now. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the anger bubbling beneath my skin. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, and I grabbed it, half expecting another message from Ryan. But it wasn't him. It was Melissa's best friend, Emily. Emily, call me when you can. I know what happened. I frowned, reading the message again. Emily had been Melissa's closest friend for years, but we weren't particularly close. Why would she reach out now? After a moment of hesitation, I dialed her number. Mark, she answered on the first ring. Thank you for calling. What do you want, Emily? I asked, my voice sharp. I need to tell you something, she said quickly. Something about Melissa. I sighed. If this is about her and Ryan, I already know. It's not just Ryan, she said, her voice trembling. There's someone else. My blood ran cold. What? I didn't know how to tell you, Emily continued, her words tumbling out in a rush. But I found out a few months ago. Melissa had an affair with another man before Ryan. I thought she ended it, but... Who? I demanded, my voice shaking. Who was it, Emily? There was a long pause before she finally spoke. It was her boss, Mark. David. The name hit me like a freight train. David, the smooth-talking, well-dressed man Melissa worked under for years. I had met him at company parties, shaken his hand, even shared drinks with him. The thought of him and Melissa together made my stomach turn. How long? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know exactly, Emily admitted. But it was before Ryan. I thought you deserved to know. Deserved to know? I said, my anger boiling over. I deserved to know years ago, Emily. Not now, when my entire life is already falling apart. I'm sorry, she said, her voice breaking. I thought you should hear it from me. I hung up without another word, my hands trembling as I set the phone down. The betrayal I thought I'd been grappling with wasn't the full story. There had been another man, another lie. And suddenly, the cracks in my marriage felt like a canyon I could never cross. I didn't sleep that night. The revelation about David clawed at my mind like a relentless storm. Melissa's betrayal with Ryan was already unbearable, but now there was this, a man she'd been with before her affair with my brother. A man she'd worked with for years, one I had trusted simply because she had told me I could. By morning, I was running on fumes, my anger and grief morphing into something darker, clarity. I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. Melissa wasn't the person I thought she was. She had lied to me, manipulated me, and made a fool out of me more than once. I needed to confront her. Not because I wanted answers, I didn't believe anything she said anymore, but because I couldn't let her keep pretending this was something we could fix. When I came downstairs, Melissa was sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in her hands. She looked up when she heard my footsteps, her face pale and drawn. Morning, she said hesitantly. I didn't respond. Instead, I grabbed the chair across from her and sat down, fixing her with a cold stare. How long were you sleeping with David? The question hit her like a slap. Her eyes widened, and her hands gripped the mug so tightly I thought it might break. What are you talking about? Don't, I snapped, cutting her off. Don't lie to me again, Melissa. Emily told me everything. Her face crumpled, and she set the mug down with shaking hands. It was a mistake, she whispered. I laughed bitterly. You seem to have a lot of those, don't you? It didn't mean anything, she said quickly. It was a fling, and it ended a long time ago. I swear, Mark. I've been trying to make things right ever since. I leaned forward, my voice low and venomous. Do you even hear yourself? You had an affair with your boss, then turned around and did the same thing with my brother. And now you're sitting here, pretending like you're the victim in all this. I'm not pretending anything, she said, her voice breaking. I hate what I've done. I hate myself for hurting you. Good, I said coldly. You should. Her tears started to fall, but I didn't feel an ounce of sympathy. She had done this to herself, to us. And now, she had to live with the consequences. What do you want from me, Melissa? I asked. Do you want me to forgive you? To act like none of this ever happened? Because I can't. I won't. I want you to give me a chance, she said desperately. Please, Mark. I'll do anything. I love you. You love me? I said, my voice rising. Is that what you call this? Love? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks an awful lot like betrayal. She sobbed harder, burying her face in her hands. I stood up, the sight of her tears only fueling my anger. I'm done, Melissa, I said. I'm done with the lies, the excuses, and the promises you can't keep. Mark, please, she begged, reaching for me. Don't walk away. We can fix this. I know we can. I stepped back, her touch feeling like poison. The only thing you've fixed is my decision, I said. I'm filing for divorce. Her face crumpled, and she let out a wail that echoed through the house. But I didn't stay to comfort her. I grabbed my keys and walked out the door, slamming it behind me. I drove aimlessly again, the weight of my decision settling over me like a heavy blanket. I had spent so long trying to hold on to the life I thought we had, the life I thought we could salvage. But the truth was clear now, there was nothing left to save. Melissa had destroyed our marriage, piece by piece, with every lie she told and every choice she made. And while I didn't know what the future held, I knew one thing for certain, I couldn't keep living in the wreckage of her betrayal. It was time to rebuild my life, without her. I didn't go back home after walking out that morning. Instead, I stayed with Mike, my oldest friend. He was one of the few people I could count on to be blunt but supportive, and I needed both right now. When I showed up at his place, he didn't ask questions, just opened the door, handed me a beer, and waited for me to start talking. I told him everything, from Melissa's affair with Ryan to the revelation about David. By the time I finished, the beer in my hand was warm, untouched, and Mike was shaking his head in disbelief. Jesus, Mark, he said finally. I don't even know what to say. That's a nightmare. Yeah, I said bitterly. And the worst part? I didn't see it coming. Not any of it. I thought we were solid. Mike leaned back in his chair, his brow furrowed. I've known you a long time, man, and if there's one thing I can say for sure, it's that none of this is your fault. Melissa made her choices. Ryan made his. And David? Screw that guy. Yeah, well, knowing it's not my fault doesn't make it hurt any less, I said, running a hand through my hair. I keep replaying it all in my head, wondering how I missed the signs. How I let this happen. You didn't let it happen, Mike said firmly. They betrayed you, plain and simple. The only thing you can do now is figure out what you want to do next. What I want to do next. I laughed bitterly. I already know what I'm going to do. I'm divorcing her. Good, he said without hesitation. You deserve better. The next few days were a blur of logistics and raw emotions. I reached out to a divorce attorney, who walked me through the steps I'd need to take. It was overwhelming, but also strangely liberating. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was taking control of my life again. Melissa called and texted constantly, begging me to come home, to talk, to give her another chance. I ignored her. Every time I saw her name on my phone, it felt like a fresh wound, and I wasn't ready to hear her voice or face her pleas. Ryan reached out too, leaving long, rambling voicemails apologizing and asking for forgiveness. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Forgiving him felt as impossible as forgiving her, and I wasn't sure if I'd ever get there. The first real moment of clarity came on a Saturday morning. I was sitting in a coffee shop, staring out the window as people passed by, going about their lives. A young couple walked by, hand in hand, laughing at something one of them had said. For a moment, I felt a pang of envy, of longing for the simplicity of love that hadn't been tainted by lies. But then I realized something. Melissa's choices didn't define me. Her betrayal didn't mean I was broken or unworthy of love. It meant she was selfish, incapable of valuing what we had. That was on her, not me. I took a deep breath, letting the realization settle. I didn't have to let her choices ruin me. I could start over. I could rebuild. That evening, I went back to the house to pack a few things. When I walked through the door, the silence was deafening. Melissa wasn't there, but her presence lingered in the scattered photos on the walls, the familiar scent of her perfume still clinging to the air. I went upstairs to the bedroom and grabbed a suitcase, throwing in clothes and essentials without bothering to organize them. As I was zipping it up, I heard the front door open and close. "Mark?" Melissa's voice echoed up the stairs. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Part of me wanted to avoid her, to slip out the back door and avoid another confrontation. But another part, the part that was tired of running, knew I needed to face her. I walked downstairs, suitcase in hand. She was standing in the living room, her face pale and tear-streaked. When she saw me, her eyes filled with fresh tears. "You're leaving," she said, her voice trembling. "I told you I was done," I said, my tone flat. "I meant it." "Mark, please," she begged, stepping toward me. "Don't do this. We can fix it." "I know we can." "No, we can't," I said, meeting her gaze. "You broke this, Melissa. You and Ryan and David. You took everything we built and destroyed it. And I can't come back from that." Her face crumpled, and she sank to her knees, sobbing. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I'm so sorry." "I know," I said quietly. "But it's not enough." I walked past her and out the door, the suitcase heavy in my hand but my heart feeling strangely lighter. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was free, not from her, but from the weight of the betrayal that had been suffocating me. As I drove away, I didn't look back. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to take. And that was enough. The days following my departure were some of the hardest I'd ever faced. There were no distractions, no more illusions of the life I thought I had. Just me and the raw, unfiltered reality of everything that had been taken from me. The silence was loud, but in that silence, I started to hear myself again. I stayed at Mike's place for another week. He gave me space but made sure I wasn't wallowing in self-pity. Every night, we'd sit on his porch with a couple of beers, talking about anything but Melissa and Ryan. It was the first time in weeks that I felt human again. One night, as we sat there staring at the stars, Mike turned to me. "You know, Mark, this isn't the end for you. It feels like it now, but it's not." "I know," I said quietly. "It's just. I'm scared to start over. I spent 10 years building a life with her. I don't even know who I am without her." "You're still you," he said firmly. "The Mark who worked his ass off, who always showed up for the people he loved. She didn't take that from you. She can't." His words stayed with me, echoing in my mind as I started piecing my life back together. I met with my attorney, filed for divorce, and began looking for a new place to live. It wasn't easy, but every step forward felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. One afternoon, as I was packing up the last of my things from the house, my phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. "Ryan, please, Mark. Just one conversation. That's all I'm asking." I stared at the message for a long time before replying, "Tomorrow. 10 a.m. Dad's house." When I arrived at Dad's house the next morning, Ryan was already there, pacing on the front porch. He looked up when he saw me, his face etched with worry. "Thanks for meeting me," he said as I stepped out of the car. "Don't thank me," I said coldly. "Just say what you need to say." We went inside, the familiar silence of the house wrapping around us like a heavy blanket. Ryan sat on the couch, his head in his hands, while I stood near the doorway, arms crossed. "I don't even know where to start," he said after a long pause. "I've been running this through my head over and over, trying to figure out what to say. But the truth is, I don't have an excuse, Mark. I don't have a reason that makes this okay. No, you don't, I said flatly. So why am I here, Ryan? Why did you want to meet? Because I needed to see you, he said, looking up at me with tears in his eyes. I needed to tell you, face to face, how sorry I am. What I did to you, it's unforgivable. I know that. But I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try to make amends. His words hung in the air, heavy with regret. For the first time, I saw not my brother, but a man completely broken by his own actions. It didn't make me pity him, it didn't make me forgive him. But it made me see that he was suffering too. I don't know if I can forgive you, Ryan, I said finally. You didn't just betray me, you betrayed our family, our bond. That's not something I can just move past. I understand, he said quietly. And I don't expect you to. But I want you to know I'm sorry. I'll carry this guilt for the rest of my life. I nodded, my chest tight with emotion. You should. With that, I turned and walked out, leaving him in the silence of our father's house. I didn't feel closure, but I felt something else, release. I didn't have to carry Ryan's guilt anymore. That was his burden, not mine. The divorce was finalized a month later. Melissa didn't fight it, she didn't have the energy or the leverage to. She moved out of the house, and I moved into a modest apartment across town. It wasn't much, but it was mine. A clean slate. I thought about her sometimes, late at night when the silence felt heavier than usual. I wondered if she missed me, if she regretted what she had done. But those thoughts came less and less often. I was learning to let go. Months turned into a year, and life began to take shape again. I reconnected with old friends, threw myself into work, and even started going to the gym. For the first time in a long time, I was focusing on myself, on what I wanted, who I wanted to be. One evening, as I walked out of the gym, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Unknown, hi, Mark. It's Melissa. I hope you're doing okay. I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it without replying. She was a chapter one had closed, a life I had left behind. As I stepped into my car and drove away, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, peace. The road ahead was mine to take, and for the first time, I wasn't looking back.